My name is Grace Miller, and I am 26 years old. Last Tuesday evening, at the Oak Steakhouse in Charlotte, North Carolina, I sat at a table for 20, surrounded by the clinking of expensive crystal and the smell of aged ribeye. We were there to celebrate my sister, Madison's spirit. That's what my parents called it. In reality, we were celebrating her ability to spend their money while doing absolutely nothing with her life. My father, Robert, stood up at the head of the table. He clinked his glass with a silver spoon, demanding silence from the room, which included my aunts, uncles, and my parents' high society friends. He pulled a thick, cream-colored envelope from his blazer. "Madison," he began, his voice thick with a pride he had never once directed toward me. "Your mother and I know how much you've wanted that limited edition Vespa scooter. We know your creative soul needs to wander. So here is $4,000 in cash. Go buy it tomorrow." The room erupted. Cheers, claps, and whistles filled the air. Madison squealed, fanning herself with the stack of $100 bills. Then the room went bone-chillingly quiet as my father turned his gaze toward me. His face shifted from beaming pride to a mask of cold indifference. "And for you, Grace," he said, his voice dropping to a dismissive mutter. He reached into his breast pocket and pulled out a single crumpled slip of paper and a cheap, generic chocolate bar. He tossed them onto my plate, right into the remains of my salad. It was a check for $5. "Since you're the family loser who can't seem to find a real career, we figured you could at least use a sugar hit. Go buy some chocolate and stop looking so miserable. You're ruining the vibe." The laughter that followed was sharper than any knife. But the worst part was Madison. She didn't just take her $4,000, she reached across the table, grabbed my $5 check, and tore it into 4 distinct pieces. "You don't even deserve $5, Grace," she whispered loud enough for the whole table to hear. "Maybe if you weren't such a disappointment, Dad would treat you like a daughter instead of a charity case." I sat there, frozen, the torn paper fluttering onto the table like snow. I didn't cry, I didn't yell. I just reached into my purse and felt the cold, metallic weight of a key fob for a car they didn't know I owned, and thought about the $70,000 employment contract sitting in my Gmail inbox. They had no idea that while they were busy trying to bury me, I had already won. Before I show you the look on their faces when my midnight black BMW pulled into their pristine driveway, I need you to take a moment to like this video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely want to hear a story about a daughter who was pushed too far and finally chose to push back. Tell me in the comments, where are you watching from right now? What time is it there? Have you ever had a sibling who could do absolutely no wrong while you were the designated family scapegoat? I read every single one of your stories, and trust me, you are not alone in this fight. To understand why that $5 check and a torn piece of paper felt like the absolute final straw, you have to understand the twisted world of the Millers. We live in the upscale, manicured suburbs of Charlotte, North Carolina. My father, Robert, is a high-profile real estate developer who measures a person's worth by their zip code. My mother, Susan, spends her days curating a life that looks perfect on an Instagram feed, but is hollow inside. In their world, appearances are the only currency. If you aren't driving the newest luxury SUV or wearing the right designer labels, you simply don't exist. And then there's Madison, my younger sister. She's 24, and in my parents' eyes, she's a delicate doll who needs constant financial padding. She's never held a job for more than 3 weeks, but she's the creative soul. I'm the one who worked double shifts at a diner to pay for my textbooks because my parents forgot my college fund. In this house, my grit was seen as boring, while Madison's laziness was celebrated as finding her truth. This dinner wasn't just a celebration for her, it was a public performance of my obsolescence. People often ask me when I first realized I was the other daughter. When did I realize that in the Miller household, love was a finite resource, and Madison had a monopoly on it? To understand the $5 check at the steakhouse, you have to look at the thousands of small cuts that came before it. In our house in Charlotte, the math was simple. Madison's whims were emergencies, and my emergencies were inconveniences. Let's go back to December 14th, 2012. It was Madison's 10th birthday. My parents, Robert and Susan, didn't just throw a party, they staged a production. They spent $20,500 renting out a local gymnastics center. I remember standing in the corner, 12 years old, holding a tray of juice boxes for Madison's friends because my mother said hiring a server was too expensive, and I needed to learn the value of helping family. The highlight of that day was the big gift. My father brought out a massive box wrapped in shimmering gold foil. Inside was a $200 limited edition Victorian dollhouse from FAO Schwartz, complete with real working miniature lights and hand-painted furniture. Madison squealed, and my parents looked at her like she was the sun itself. 2 months later, it was my birthday, February 22nd, 2013. I woke up expecting maybe a special breakfast, or at least a happy birthday when I walked into the kitchen. Instead, my mother was busy packing Madison's bag for a weekend cheerleading camp that cost $800. "Oh, Grace, happy birthday," my mother said, not even looking up from the suitcase. "There's some leftover pizza in the fridge for dinner. Your father and I have to take Madison to Raleigh for the competition. We'll be back Sunday." My gift? A $10 gift card to a bookstore and a pack of socks. When I tried to hide my disappointment, my father scowled. "Don't be ungrateful, Grace. We're spending a fortune on your sister's development. You're the capable one. You don't need all this extra attention. Stop being so needy." That was the recurring theme. I was the strong one, which was just code for the one we can ignore. By the time I reached high school in 2018, the disparity turned from hurtful to systemic. On Madison's 16th birthday, the driveway was decorated with a massive red bow. Sitting there was a brand new Jeep Wrangler, a $35,000 machine that she hadn't spent a single second working for. My parents told her she needed a safe car to express her freedom. I was 18 at the time, a senior. I didn't have a car. I didn't even have a bike. To get to my part-time job as a cashier at Harris Teeter, I had to walk 3.2 miles every day after school, rain or shine. I remember one humid July afternoon in Charlotte, the kind where the air feels like wet wool. I was walking home in my polyester uniform, sweat stinging my eyes, when Madison drove past me in her air-conditioned Jeep, her friends laughing in the back seat. She didn't even slow down. When I got home, exhausted and my feet blistered, my mother looked at my worn-out sneakers and sighed. "You really should take better care of your things, Grace. We can't afford to keep buying you shoes every 6 months." I was making $8.50 an hour. I bought those shoes myself. But the ultimate betrayal, the one that finally broke my heart and replaced it with a core of cold, hard steel, happened during my college applications. I had worked myself to the bone. I carried a 4.2 GPA, was the captain of the debate team, and spent my weekends volunteering at a local shelter. I got into the University of North Carolina at Charlotte for their prestigious data science program. Because of my hard work, I secured a partial scholarship, but there was still a $10,000 a year gap in tuition and housing. I sat my parents down in our dining room on April 15th, 2019. I had a folder ready with all the costs, my savings plan, and a humble request for a loan. Not a gift, a loan. "I've saved $4,000 from the grocery store," I told them, my voice trembling with hope. "I just need help with the rest. I'll pay you back with interest once I intern." My father didn't even look at the folder. He just took a sip of his scotch and shook his head. "Grace, we just don't have that kind of liquidity. Madison is starting her influencer journey, and we've already committed to paying for her high-end camera equipment and a personal stylist. It's an investment in her future. You're smart. You'll find a way. Take out some loans. That's what strong girls do." My mother nodded in agreement. "Besides, UNCC is so close. You can just keep living here and walk to the bus stop. It'll build character." 2 weeks later, the neuroharmony or whatever wellness craze Madison was into at the time became the new priority. My parents announced at dinner that they were funding a $25,000 gap year trip for Madison to find her soul in Europe. They bought her a first-class ticket to Paris, booked five-star hotels in Santorini, and gave her a $5,000 monthly allowance. I stood in the kitchen, washing the dishes from the dinner where they toasted to Madison's journey of self-discovery, and I realized something vital. My parents didn't lack liquidity. They lacked love for me. They were willing to mortgage their house for Madison's comfort, but they wouldn't spare 10 grand for my education. That was the night I stopped being Grace, the daughter who tries. I became Grace, the woman who survives. I looked at the $5,000 a month allowance they were handing to my sister, money that could have paid for my entire degree, and I made a silent vow. I would never ask them for a single cent again. I would work until my hands bled. I would study until my eyes burned, and I would build a life so far above their reach that they would have to crane their necks just to see my shadow. While Madison was taking selfies in front of the Eiffel Tower on their dime, I was signing papers for $40,000 in student loans and picking up night shifts at a 24-hour diner on Tryon Street. I was sleeping 4 hours a night, living on black coffee, and the sheer, burning desire to prove them wrong. They thought they were burying me by giving me nothing. They didn't realize I was a seed, and the dirt they were throwing on me was exactly what I needed to grow. Every time my mother would call me from a boutique in Milan to tell me how inspired Madison was feeling, I would look at my bank balance, 12.42, and I wouldn't cry. I would just go back to my spreadsheets. I would study the data patterns, the algorithms, the financial structures that ran the world. I knew that one day I wouldn't be the girl walking in the rain. I would be the one controlling the storm. While Madison was finding herself in a 5-star hotel in Santorini, I was finding out how much a human body can endure before it simply stops. From 2019 to 2023, my life wasn't measured in experiences or memories. It was measured in shifts, credit hours, and the exact number of cents in my savings account. My parents, Robert and Susan, had effectively checked out of my life the moment I refused to be the easy daughter who just accepted their crumbs. To pay for my tuition at UNC Charlotte, which was roughly $7,200 per semester after my scholarship, I had to become a machine. My day started at 4:30 a.m. I worked the breakfast shift at a greasy spoon diner on the edge of the city. For 6 hours every morning, I hauled heavy trays of bacon and eggs for $2.13 an hour plus tips. On a good day, I'd walk away with $60. On a bad day, I'd have coffee spilled on my uniform by a regular who didn't think I was moving fast enough. I'd change in the diner's cramped bathroom, scrub the smell of fried onions off my skin, and sprint to my 11 a.m. statistics lecture. But that was just the beginning. From 2 p.m. to 6 p.m., I tutored high schoolers in advanced calculus. I charged $35 an hour, which was my highest earning gig, but it was mentally draining. I'd sit across from teenagers who had the latest iPhones and cars bought by their parents, and they'd complain about how hard their lives were. I'd just smile, take their parents' money, and put it directly into a hidden envelope under my mattress. Then came the night shift. From 10 p.m. to 3 a.m., 3 days a week, I did remote data entry for a logistics firm. It was soul-crushing work, inputting thousands of tracking numbers into a spreadsheet for $15 an hour. My eyes would burn from the blue light of my laptop, and my back would ache from sitting in a cheap plastic chair I'd found at a thrift store for $5. I'd sleep for maybe 3 hours. Then the alarm would go off at 4:30 a.m., and I'd do it all over again. My parents and Madison didn't just ignore my struggle, they weaponized it. I remember a Sunday in October 2021. Madison had just returned from her 3rd wellness retreat in Sedona, the one my parents paid $12,000 for. She walked into the kitchen wearing a designer yoga set that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. I was sitting at the table, surrounded by textbooks and a bowl of plain ramen. "Grace, you look haggard," Madison said, her voice dripping with fake concern. "Mom, look at her. She has dark circles under her eyes. It's so low vibe." Honestly, you should just drop out and find a husband like Vanessa did in those stories I read online. This whole career thing isn't working for you. My mother looked up from her iPad, where she was browsing for new patio furniture. "She's right, Grace. You're making the house feel heavy with all this struggle. If you worked a real job instead of these little side hustles, maybe you wouldn't be so miserable. But I guess some people just aren't meant for the high life. I didn't argue. I didn't tell them I had $18,000 saved up toward my graduation goal. I didn't tell them my GPA was a perfect 4.0. I just took my ramen and went to my room. The most painful day, however, was May 12th, 2023, my graduation day. I had spent 4 years working 80-hour weeks between school and my 3 jobs. I was graduating summa cum laude with a degree in data science and analytics. I had sent my parents the invitation 3 months in advance. I had even bought them 2 VIP seat tickets with my own money, $50 each, so they wouldn't have to sit in the sun. I stood in the staging area with 500 other graduates, looking out at the sea of families in the bleachers. I saw fathers holding bouquets of roses. I saw mothers crying with pride. I kept my eyes fixed on the 2 seats I had paid for, row 3, seats 12 and 13. They stayed empty. Halfway through the ceremony, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from my mother. "So sorry, Grace. Madison had a minor emergency. Her new kitten is feeling anxious, and she needed us to take her to the holistic vet in Asheville. It's a 2-hour drive. We'll have a celebratory dinner when we're back. So proud of you, honey." A kitten's anxiety was more important than my 4 years of blood, sweat, and tears. I walked across that stage, shook the dean's hand, and accepted my diploma. As I walked back to my seat, a stranger, an older woman who had noticed me looking at the empty seats, reached out and squeezed my hand. "You did it, sweetheart," she whispered. "You don't need them to see it for it to be real." That was the moment I stopped hoping for their approval. I realized that if I wanted a family, I'd have to build one from the people who actually showed up. 2 weeks later, the silence paid off. I had applied to 24 high-level firms in the Charlotte area. Most people in my class were struggling to find internships, but my resume was different. I didn't just have a degree. I had 4 years of work experience and a grit they couldn't teach in a classroom. On June 1st, 2023, I sat in a glass-walled office in Uptown Charlotte for my final interview with Vanguard Financial Group. The hiring manager, a sharp woman named Elena, looked at my transcript and then at my work history. "You worked 3 jobs while maintaining a 4.0 in data science?" she asked, leaning back in her chair. "Yes, ma'am," I replied. "I didn't have a choice." "Actually, Grace," she said with a smile, "you did. You chose to work, and that's exactly what we need here. Most of our applicants have had everything handed to them. They crack under pressure. You are the pressure." She pushed a folder across the table. It was an offer for a junior data analyst position. Base salary, $70,000. Signing bonus, $5,000. Full benefits, 401k match, and a private office. I drove home that day in my beat-up, rusted 2005 Toyota that I'd bought for $1,200 in cash 2 years prior. It shook whenever I went over 50 miles per hour, and the AC was broken, but I felt like a queen. I walked into the house, and my father was in the living room complaining about the cost of Madison's latest European reunion trip. "Grace, did you finally get a job at that grocery store?" he asked without looking up. "I got a job, Dad," I said quietly. "Good. Maybe now you can start paying us $400 a month in rent. You're an adult now, and we can't keep supporting your lifestyle." Supporting my lifestyle? I had paid for every meal, every textbook, and every gallon of gas for the last 4 years. I looked at him and nodded. "Sure, Dad, I'll pay rent." I stayed in that house for 6 more months. It was the hardest 6 months of my life. I had to endure their constant belittling while I was making more money than my father's junior associates. I worked from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. in a high-rise office, wearing professional blazers, and then I'd come home and eat my ramen in silence so they wouldn't suspect anything. I saved every single penny. By December 2023, with my signing bonus and my salary, I had $32,000 in liquid cash. I didn't buy clothes. I didn't go out. I had one goal. On December 18th, I walked into the BMW dealership on Independence BLVD. I didn't look like a high roller. I was wearing my old college hoodie and jeans. The salesman ignored me for 20 minutes, hovering around a man in a tailored suit instead. Finally, a younger salesman named Marcus approached me. "Can I help you, miss?" "I want that BMW 3 Series in the window," I said, pointing to a midnight black CPO model with only 10,000 miles on it. "The one for $28,500. "It's a beautiful car," Marcus said, slightly skeptical. "Would you like to talk about financing options?" "No," I said, pulling a cashier's check from my purse. "I'm paying in full. Today." When I drove that car off the lot, the steering wheel felt like victory. It was smooth, silent, and powerful, but I didn't take it home. Not yet. I parked it in a paid parking garage 5 blocks from our house. I kept driving my rusty Toyota. I kept wearing my old clothes. I kept playing the role of the loser daughter. I was waiting for the perfect moment. I was waiting for the moment when their pride would be at its highest and their cruelty at its peak. I was waiting for the dinner at the Oak Steakhouse. I was waiting for the $5 check. They thought they were the ones in control of the story. They thought they were the ones who decided who won and who lost. But as I sat in my room that night, looking at the BMW keys hidden in my desk drawer, I realized that the best revenge isn't just succeeding. It's succeeding while the people who doubted you are still laughing at you, completely unaware that the joke is actually on them. The invitation came on a Tuesday in April 2024. It wasn't a phone call. My mother, Susan, didn't do phone calls with me anymore unless she needed something. It was a group text titled Family Celebration. "We are hosting a backyard BBQ this Sunday at 2 p.m. to celebrate Madison's new Vespa and her creative breakthrough. Grace, do try to look presentable. We have invited the neighbors and some of your father's colleagues. Don't bring that rusted Toyota into the driveway. Park it on the next street over so it doesn't ruin the photos. See you then." I stared at the screen of my phone. I was sitting in my private office in uptown Charlotte, looking out at the city skyline. My $70,000 contract was signed and sealed. My midnight black BMW was sitting in a secure garage just 2 blocks away. For months, I had lived a double life. In the eyes of my parents, I was the struggling dropout who worked odd jobs. In reality, I was the woman who had built a foundation they couldn't even dream of. I replied with a simple, "I'll be there." Sunday arrived, and the North Carolina humidity was already thick. I didn't take the BMW, not yet. I drove that clattering, rusted 2005 Toyota and parked it exactly where my mother told me to, out of sight, like a shameful secret. I walked toward my parents' house, the same manicured lawn I'd spent my childhood mowing while Madison watched from the porch. The backyard was decorated in white and gold. My father, Robert, was at the grill, flipping expensive steak and laughing with his business associates. Madison was center stage, wearing a sundress that probably cost $500. Next to her was the Vespa scooter, gleaming in the sun. It was a beautiful machine, but all I could see when I looked at it was the money my parents had refused to give me for my education. "Oh, Grace, you actually came," my mother said, approaching me with a glass of Chardonnay. She looked me up and down, her eyes lingering on my off-brand shoes and the simple dress I'd chosen specifically to look cheap. "You look tired. Still doing that data entry work? It's a shame you didn't have Madison's vision. She's already thinking of starting a travel vlog with this scooter. She has ambition." "I'm doing okay, Mom," I said, keeping my voice neutral. The BBQ proceeded like a well-choreographed play. Every few minutes, my father would clink his glass and make a toast to Madison. "To the child who keeps our spirits high," he'd shout. Meanwhile, I was relegated to the service role. "Grace, since you're not doing anything important, could you go inside and refill the ice trays? And the trash is getting full." I did it. I played the part. I let the neighbors look at me with that mixture of pity and disdain. I heard the whispers. "That's the other one, the one who couldn't keep up with the family's success." Around 4:01 p.m., the atmosphere shifted. Madison was leaning against her scooter, holding her phone up for a selfie. "I honestly don't know how people live without freedom," she said, looking directly at me. "Grace, how much longer are you going to drive that tin can of yours? It's embarrassing. Dad said he saw it parked on the next street and a neighbor asked if a vagrant was moving in. The guests laughed. My father stepped forward, his face flushed from the sun and the wine. Now, Madison, be kind. Not everyone was born to lead. Some people are just meant to be background characters. Grace, that $5 check we gave you at the steakhouse. You haven't spent it all in one place, have you? This was it. The moment they thought they had me pinned down. Actually, I said, stepping into the center of the patio. The chatter died down. I didn't spend the $5. Madison tore it up, remember? But it didn't matter. I didn't need your $5, and I didn't need the scooter money. My mother sighed loudly. Grace, don't start one of your poor me speeches. This is Madison's day. If you're going to be jealous, you can leave. I'm not jealous, Mom. I'm just finished, I said. I pulled my phone out and hit a button on an app. A few seconds later, the low, powerful rumble of a high-end engine echoed through the quiet suburban street. It wasn't the sound of a scooter. It was the sound of precision engineering. A midnight black BMW 3 Series turned the corner and pulled slowly into the driveway, blocking my father's Lexus. The guests turned. My father's jaw dropped. Who the hell is parking that in my driveway? I held up the key fob and pressed the button. The BMW's headlights flashed, and the horn gave a polite, confident chirp. That's my car, Dad, I said. The silence that followed was heavier than the humidity. Madison's eyes were wide, her mouth hanging open. My mother looked from the car to me, then back to the car. That's impossible, Madison stammered. You're a loser. You work at a grocery store. You can't even afford a bus pass. I haven't worked at a grocery store in years, Madison, I said, walking toward the car. I opened the driver's side door and pulled out a leather-bound folder. While you were in Europe, finding your soul on Mom and Dad's dime, I was working 3 jobs. While you were taking selfies on this scooter, I was signing a $70,000 a year contract as a lead data analyst. I walked over to my father and handed him the folder. Go ahead, Robert. Read it. It's the contract for the loser daughter. And while you're at it, check the second page. It's the bank statement showing I paid for that BMW in cash. No loans, no bridge money from parents. Just me. The neighbors were now leaning in, their hushed whispers turning into shocked gasps. My father took the folder, his hands trembling. The golden child was suddenly standing in the shadow of the one they had tried to erase. But why didn't you tell us? My mother asked, her voice small and wavering. I looked her dead in the eye. Because you never asked. You were too busy making sure I felt small so Madison could feel big. You gave her $4,000 for a toy. You gave me $5 for a chocolate bar. You told me I was a disappointment. But the truth is, I'm the only one in this family who actually built something. I turned to Madison, who was clutching her scooter handles like a lifeline. You can keep the scooter, Madison. It suits you. It's small. Just like the life Mom and Dad have built for you. I started walking toward my BMW. The reckoning had begun, and for the first time in 26 years, I was the one holding the microphone. The silence in that backyard was so thick you could have cut it with one of my father's expensive steak knives. My mother's wine glass was tilted dangerously, a drop of Chardonnay falling onto her white linen dress, but she didn't even notice. All eyes were on the midnight black machine idling in the driveway. It wasn't just a car, it was a physical manifestation of every lie they'd told themselves about me. That's not your car, Madison finally hissed, her voice cracking. She stepped off her gleaming new Vespa, the $4,000 toy looking like a child's tricycle compared to the BMW. You probably stole the keys. Or you're pet-sitting it for some rich person you work for. Mom, tell her to stop lying. She's embarrassing us in front of everyone. My mother, Susan, finally found her voice, though it was weak and trembling. Grace, honey, where did this really come from? We know you've been struggling. We know you haven't been, successful. There's no need to put on a show for the neighbors. I didn't answer her. Instead, I walked to the driver's side door, reached in, and pulled out a thick, leather-bound folder. I walked back to the center of the patio, where the most influential people in our Charlotte social circle were standing, neighbors like the Hendersons and my father's business partners. "This isn't a show, Mom," I said, my voice steady, projecting to the back of the yard just like I'd been trained to do in my data presentations. "For 4 years, you told everyone I was a loser. You told them I was a dropout. You told them I couldn't hold down a job at a grocery store." I opened the folder and pulled out the first document. It was my employment contract with Vanguard Financial Group, printed on heavy, high-quality bond paper. "Dad, you're in real estate. You know what a good starting salary looks like in this city," I said, handing the paper directly to my father, Robert. "Read the second paragraph. Out loud." My father's hands were shaking as he took the paper. He squinted, his face turning a shade of purple I'd never seen before. "Lead data analyst. Base salary $70,000. Signing bonus $5,000. A gasp rippled through the crowd. Mrs. Henderson leaned in, her eyes wide. $70,000. "Grace, that's more than my son makes after 10 years at the bank." Madison was vibrating with rage now. "He's lying. She forged it. She's always been jealous of me. She probably found that template online." "I didn't forge the bank statements, Madison," I said, pulling out the next set of papers. "And I certainly didn't forge the receipt from the BMW dealership on Independence Boulevard. $28,500, paid in full, in cash." I turned to my father, who was still staring at my contract as if it were written in an ancient, cursed language. "But there's something else in this folder, Dad. Something I only found out last month when I finally got access to my old savings accounts." This was the part that was going to burn the house down. I pulled out a series of bank transfer logs from 2019. "Remember my college fund?" I asked. "The one you told me was empty because of the market crash? The one that was supposed to have the $15,000 grandpa left for my education?" My mother's face went from pale to ghostly white. She reached for the table to steady herself. "I did some digging," I continued, my voice getting colder. "On August 14th, 2019, $4,000 was transferred out of that account. It wasn't for the market. It was moved into an account ending in 4492. That's your account, Dad. And do you know what the memo said? Madison's summer camp." The guests were now whispering frantically. My father's business partner, Mr. Whitaker, crossed his arms, looking at my father with pure disgust. "And then there's the most recent one," I said, flipping to the final page. "March 12th, 2024. Another $4,000 moved, the exact amount you just spent on that Vespa. You didn't give Madison a gift from your hard work, Dad. You stole the last of my college fund, money that was legally mine, to buy your golden child a toy while you handed me a $5 check and told me to go eat chocolate." I looked at the guests. "He told you all I was a charity case. He told you I was a burden. But the truth is, I've been subsidizing my sister's lifestyle with the money my grandfather intended for my future." Madison screamed, a high, piercing sound of pure entitlement. "It's our money. Everything in this house belongs to us. You're just a bitter, jealous—" "I'm the owner of a BMW and a career you'll never have the discipline to achieve, Madison," I cut her off. "You can keep the scooter. It was bought with stolen money, and every time you start that engine, I want you to remember that your freedom was paid for by the sister you tried to tear down." My father tried to step toward me, his face a mask of desperate damage control. "Grace, let's go inside. We can discuss the accounting errors. There's no need to make a scene in front of our friends." "Oh, I think there's every need, Robert," I said, looking at Mr. Whitaker and the others. "You wanted everyone to see how generous you were. Now they see who you really are. You didn't just fail as parents. You're thieves." I turned to my mother, who was now sobbing into her hands. "You knew, didn't you? You watched me walk 3 miles to work in the rain while you spent my tuition money on Madison's gap year outfits. You sat at that steakhouse and watched Madison tear up that $5 check. And you laughed. Well, who's laughing now?" Mr. Whitaker, who had known my father for 20 years, stepped forward. "Robert, Is this true? You use the girl's trust fund for a Vespa? We're talking about a fiduciary violation here, not just bad parenting. My father stammered. It's a family matter, Bill. You don't understand the complexities. The complexities of stealing from one daughter to spoil the other? Mr. Whitaker shook his head. I think I understand perfectly. I don't think I can move forward with that North Hills partnership, Robert. I need to work with people I can trust. The sound of car doors slamming began to echo through the quiet street. My mother tried to chase after Mrs. Henderson. Diane, please! Grace is just being dramatic. You know how she gets. Mrs. Henderson didn't even turn around. Actually, Susan, I think for the first time in 26 years, I'm seeing exactly how Grace is. And frankly, I'm embarrassed I ever took your side. Madison was still on the scooter, her face a blotchy red. I'm keeping it. You can't take it back. It's mine. Keep it, Madison, I called out as I stepped into my car. But just so you know, that $5 check, I'm going to frame the pieces. Every time I look at it in my new apartment, I'll remind myself that I was worth more than $5, even when the people who were supposed to love me thought I was worth nothing. The leather seat of the BMW felt cool against my back. I inhaled the new car smell, the scent of my own hard work, my own late nights, and my own victory. As I drove away, I saw my father drop the folder onto the grass, the papers scattering in the wind. The man who cared about nothing but his reputation had just lost it in front of the only people who mattered to him. I was no longer the loser daughter. I was Grace Miller, and I was finally free. I didn't wait for an answer. I turned my back on them, the silence behind me more satisfying than any applause. I walked to my BMW, the engine purring to life as I hit the remote start. I looked back one last time as I opened the door. My father was standing alone in the middle of the patio, holding the evidence of his own betrayal, while his friends and colleagues started walking toward their cars without saying a word of goodbye. The golden child was sitting on her stolen scooter, looking smaller and more pathetic than I ever had in my worn-out sneakers. I put the car in gear. I had come here to show them the car, but I realized as I pulled out of the driveway that I had given myself something much better. The truth. And in the rearview mirror, I saw the Miller family's perfect image shatter into 1,000 irreparable pieces. I didn't wait for an apology. From people like Robert and Susan, an apology isn't a sign of growth. It's just damage control because the neighbors were watching. As I backed my BMW out of their driveway, the gravel crunching under my tires felt like the final period at the end of a very long, painful sentence. In my rearview mirror, I saw my mother still standing on the patio, her hand over her mouth, and my father staring at the empty air where his reputation used to be. Madison was still on her scooter, looking not like a golden child, but like a small, lost girl who had never learned how to stand on her own 2 feet. I drove back toward my apartment in uptown Charlotte, the city lights reflecting off the hood of my car. For the first time in 26 years, the weight in my chest was gone. I realized then that I hadn't bought this car to flex on them, and I hadn't revealed my salary to make them feel poor. I did it because for my entire life, they had looked at me and seen a loser. I needed them to finally see the truth, that I was the only thing in that family that was actually real. When I got to my apartment, I took the original pieces of that torn $5 check out of my purse. I didn't throw them away. Instead, I taped them to the inside of my front door. It's the first thing I see when I leave for work every morning. It's a reminder that I was once valued at $5, and I had the courage to tell the world I was worth a lifetime more. To those of you watching who are the Grace of your family, the scapegoats, the ones told they are too much or not enough, listen to me. You cannot earn love from people who are committed to withholding it. You cannot build a future on a foundation of their approval. Sometimes the most successful thing you can do is walk away and build your own world, brick by brick, until they have to look up just to see your shadow. My life is quiet now. I've blocked their numbers, and I don't check their social media. I'm focused on my career, my peace, and the new family of friends I've built who show up for me without being asked. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever been the one left with the $5 check while someone else got the cash, leave a comment with the word reborn. I want to know you're out there. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories of justice and resilience. My name is Grace Miller. I'm 26 years old. I drive a BMW I paid for with my own sweat. And for the first time in my life, I am exactly where I belong.